Episode of the Levers podcast with the Levered lads here. And today we're going to be talking about games and specifically how it's relevant to crypto. Obviously, we all are working in crypto now, and it's probably 90% of what we think about. And I think it's relevant in uh, not just gaming is relevant in crypto, literal video games, but game theory is relevant in a lot of these Ponzi's or pseudo Ponzi's and like yield farming games. And yeah, it's something that I know I've been thinking about recently, and so have you guys. And so that's what we're going to be covering. If you guys want to kick it off, any hot takes?
Um, I'll start with just sort of how, at least I think about why we like games and what games kind of are. So, I wrote an article recently, kind of trying to figure out uh, the answer to this question. And for me, like I'm someone who really has always liked games. Always played sports. Always want to sort of like test my mind, like compete against people, like usually overly competitive, in fact. And I was like, well, what is like this urge? Why is this here? And at least the sort of thesis I came to was we like games because like ultimately what we're wired for is survival, right? Like we want to survive, we want to gather resources, and we want to procreate. The thing is now for most of us, certainly in crypto land and even just like Western nations, the survival thing isn't really an issue anymore, right? But you still have that fire to replicate survival scenarios. So I think that's ultimately what a game is. You see like a lot of even animals like tussling with their brothers or other animals in the herd. Like that's practicing survival, right? Like these are survival simulations. And we like these games because I think the game ultimately like triggers a lot of the same pathways and chemicals that survival does, right? Like these are nice feelings when we win games, when we compete, we want to access a flow state, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's ultimately what pushes us to kind of play these games. And to sort of pivot towards crypto, I think crypto is a great example of, as Kobe said recently, a metagame. And I think it's a really good metagame because not only is it like a deeply social game, but the stakes are very, very high, right? Like part of what survival is the risk, the downside is catastrophic. It's death, right? And so we don't really have that downside anymore. But if you're, gambling or speculating or even investing in crypto, your possibility of loss or something that sort of mimics death is pretty large. And so I think that's kind of what explains a lot of the gamification of financial markets. I think that kind of also applies to kind of these metaverse concepts, the ability to like create games for people um, that are meaningful. And I think the meaning comes from like having some risk, having a stake in that game. And I think that will kind of only continue the like infusion of risk into these games where they go from like sort of playful to like it's not really playful. It's just like life. Like the game has replaced life in a way.
Yeah, I feel like it starts off like games, or I'm just completely just shooting from the hip, but games start as like a way for people to learn to cooperate and coordinate with each other, like sports games, right? Like basketball or football. You learn to cooperate and like be a part of a team, and there's well-defined rules. And like it starts as like a teaching device for children, but then maybe to TJ's point, like now we're so post survival that like those games used to teach you how to like maybe like I don't know, cooperate as a team to hunt or to do serious things that were like in the real world to help you survive. But now we're so post scarcity, like the games just now have flipped and become our way of like doing like acquiring resources. I don't know. There seems like the game was first for like education and training, and then somehow at some point in time now it flips where we're still playing these games, but for like real life,
Yeah.
which is kind of trippy. And it's like it seems like the internet just magnifies that, right? Like people are always like, "Oh, it feels like I'm playing a video game when you're playing crypto." Like, why is it like that? It's pretty trippy to think about.
I think that's right. Like the game used to be the simulation, right? But in post scarcity, like the game is the reality.
Yeah, yeah. The game prepared you for reality, and then the game became reality. Which um, And that's why now, yeah, like Kobe's comparing investing to like playing literally like League of Legends, which anyone who's like deep into it right now is like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But I feel like 50 years ago that would have been like weird, or maybe not. I feel like maybe a lot of old like CEOs would compare like leadership to like being a football coach or some shit. Like, so maybe it isn't new. It just feels new because being compared to video games instead of sports games. There is something like deeply like resonating about games as like a conceptual model for thinking about the world.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember in one of our old episodes, like, well, we talked about narratives, right? And he kind of talks about narratives in this article. That the narratives are like, it's kind of another, like you could say it's like you can replace that word with metas or narratives, right? Somewhat. And like I remember I said something about like, oh, the crypto markets are all narratives. And then TJ, you said, well, like so are equities, and you brought up I think Facebook, or it is Facebook as an example, right? Then they don't pay dividends, which I didn't know at the time. And I since then I remember reading something, I don't know who it was, man. It wasn't Nassim Taleb, but it was like some like hedge fund guy, and he was talking about how that he liked trading stocks because it felt like a game. It felt like a fun game that you could use to make a lot of money. So yeah, I think it runs like it's like very evident in crypto, but I think everywhere, like Naval talks about, which we've probably talked about many times, but like Naval talks about how a lot of people play social games versus
Right.
wealth games,
Right.
I mean, growing your following on YouTube, right? Which I'm trying to do lately. Like that's a game,
I mean, ultimately,
Simping girls on Instagram, the game.
simping, of course.
Like you guys are using those dating apps. I think you are, but right, those probably are like feel like games sometimes.
Dude, I just
No comment.
I just simped into a subscription for Hinge. I've been holding out for so long, and I thought there's no women, so I was like, all right,
Yeah,
gotta do it. You gotta use software to your advantage. It rearranges the resources in a more efficient order.
I think the reason why games are so good is because it provides like, it's this idea that there's agents or players in the game, and there's a set of rules that the game is played by, and then there's like winners and losers, right? And that's actually just like surprisingly like general model. And so like, and it also reduces complexity. I think that's why we like the idea of the game, because you basically like conceptualize something about reality as a certain game. You're like, these are the rules, and now I'm going to play by these rules, right? And so like in reality, like there isn't a game, right? Probably, but then you get to simplify it in your mind and be like, oh, I'm just going to take this move because that's the winning move. And I think that's like kind of Kobe's point in the metagame is, people think it's one game and they think there's like one move and they're winning with that move, but really the actual game dynamics have shifted because reality doesn't care like what game you think you're playing, and it moves, right? So what we've seen is like at one point the game was just like BTC maxis running it up because of like inflation, and then there was like the DeFi summer with Ethereum, and then now there's new games that are being played, but then you still hear like on Twitter people saying it's the old game, right?
Yep.
And like that's kind of his point. Is like, don't listen to people telling you what the game is when it's clearly not the game, right? Like,
Yeah,
and
dude.
I think that's kind of the genius of the post is like, it's honestly about like rationality in a way, like, and not getting duped by pundits on Twitter, because I feel like
Dude, that reminds me of
could be broker if they got into like BTC or ETH later, because all the loudest people on Twitter are in BTC and ETH. But they got into after the game had already been played.
Right, dude. It reminds me of that. Like, I remember this like period of a few weeks where like every day on Twitter I was seeing some like accountant make a thread about like why like when you use DCF analysis on Sushi Swap, like, oh, dude, sushi's going to 100. Do you guys remember that? And it was like that. It's like he's trying to play like the DCF like stock evaluation game in crypto, and And it was kind of a thing for a while though. I remember like a lot of people saying that, like smart people.
So by the way, I don't think that game has started yet, but I think that game will start in 2022. I think the value game starts in 2022. Reversion to value. Like think about who the incremental buyer is now, right? So like we went from, like, to Chris' point, BTC maximalism, like digital gold, hedge against inflation. Ethereum comes into the mix, right? Like world computer, fine. DeFi, fine. NFT, fine. GameFi, fine, right? So we sort of had like 5 games in my mind. And I feel like in 2022 is when you have a new demographic of player entering the game. And it's a demographic of player that wants to see some fundamental utility to the underlying technology. So like, I feel like what you'll see some sort of resurgence of DeFi. I don't know what it looks like, right? But to the extent that you can have like an open financial infrastructure that serves people sort of color and geography blind, quickly, cheaply, lots of different assets, like that's clearly a hook. It's clearly a win, right? There's at some point like that's going to grow. And I think that's 2022 because you have like these sort of traditional investors, I think, entering the space slowly. I mean, you still have crypto people with a shitload of money, right? And they're going to do what they're going to do. They're going to keep playing the meta games. But you do have this huge contingent, I think, in 2022 that's going to be like, where is the stuff in the space that is actually making a dent and solving problems? And so I feel like they'll look at like the DeFi stuff, and then they'll look at like this part of crypto, which is sort of what I call the hives. Like these are hardware infrastructure services, like the live peers, like Render, Helium, Arweave, right? Like stuff that uses a network to combine hardware in a more efficient manner. Sort of like like an Uber or like an Airbnb, but with a token or whatever. Like that, I think, is a metagame. And I think sort of to what Chris was saying, like you can only almost fit Kobe's article into like a James Carse finite and infinite games model, right? Like these games that we've been playing, each one is a finite game. But you could get lost thinking that the finite game hasn't ended, right? And you think you're in an infinite game, but you're really in the BTC Maxi game, and that game ended like 2 years ago. So really, like the best players, I think, are the ones that like fit these little games. They realize they come to an end, and they're playing such that they can continue to play in the next one. You don't want to get got in this game. You don't want to lose, but you want to continue to play and continue to play and continue to play.
I think. Well, go ahead, Shake.
No, it's just I wanted to say, like, Kobe notes this in the article. Like most people, like he's like most people are better off not trying to like beat the crypto market and just like buy crypto and like it's like the fastest growing asset class, because doing that is really fucking hard, like doing like playing the games and like rotating and shit is like it's difficult. I just wanted to know.
I mean, for me, this article is like, I agree with everything he's saying, but I'm not going to try to even guess the metagame. Like, like my archetype, like just I can't keep up with the information, and I'm like too busy to try to guess it, So it's definitely this idea of like, he's kind of saying like, after the new metagame has emerged, you just allocate some capital to it, and like, you don't even have to guess what the metagame is. You just wait and you just notice it. And you allocate a little safe amount, and you can do well as a trader like that. But like, I'm not really a trader, like, so
I think like the best traders, like there's this guy on Twitter named Ansem who I think like had this crazy streak. He was on Up Only recently, but he had this insane streak, right, where he basically like 100x like his fucking portfolio and made like $10 million this year. Anyways, like that guy like hit every meta game and like rotated perfectly and sold the top, blah blah blah. And it's like most people can't do that. But I think thinking about it, to your point, like I think you don't have to like get each game perfectly and allocate perfectly, but like just understanding when your thing is like in the meta or out of like if you can recognize that these like mechanisms are at play, then that can help you like in a smaller way. You know what I mean? Where like if you find something that's really good that wasn't some big narrative or hasn't been yet this past year, then you can say, okay, there's some probability that this will become it, and I can allocate now and like forget about it until people are like hyping it up on Twitter. Yes. You don't have to necessarily guess what's like directly next.
Agreed. Agreed completely. That's more my archetype right there. Like you don't have to play.
You did do well.
metagame.
Like you did that with Helium. Like I remember when you were into Helium, right? That became part of the metagame. I would say Helium and Arweave. I mean, which you kind of alluded to, but yeah, like
Exactly.
I think you can. It's like value investing, but based on a narrative ahead of time. You don't know when,
Right.
but you know it's going. You can say with certainty, like it's going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like it's I don't know, like much respect for the lads that like rotate in real time to the highest and best use for their capital and like are keeping track of when the metagame is on and when it's sort of spinning off of rotation. But I feel like ultimately what that takes is like a crazy fracturing of attention and being comfortable with that, and then just like being 24/7, which I think is just, it's, at least for me, it's tough to continue to be happy and healthy if that's sort of the modality. And maybe this is sort of a cope, but yeah, what my sort of strategy is, and it's done okay, not fucking 100x, because I haven't put the skin in the game that guy has. But what I mean by skin in the game is like actual skin, like commitment to the game. But yeah, like if you can figure out that, you know, in a year or 2 years, I think like this metagame will be on, and you do your, you know, fundamental research today about, you know, which are going to be the names that sort of comprise that metagame, and then you buy, and then you sit and you continue to research. It could be, I think it would be fairly effective.
Yeah, dude. I mean, I completely agree. I think that happened to all of us with Solana, you know, like we were talking about Solana, not when it was like $1, but like when it was like all throughout summer and before, like after the crash, right? And we all had conviction on that, I know for certain. And so, and like we were in it when it was like, we were just in it for a while before like a bunch of this capital came over. So we didn't time it perfectly, but like you had conviction. So that, yeah, like that's why I think you can still like drastically outperform like Bitcoin by just having like a couple things like that you do. You don't need to hit it, I guess. Yeah.
I think the risk to this whole metagame thing too is like it's just rife with like hindsight bias, right? So post hoc being like, oh, this was the games, and if you just played the metagame, you would have made a lot of money. It's like in the moment, it's not obvious when the current game's ending and the new one's starting, right? And for the dude that hits every metagame, there's a bunch of people who missed the wrong one or like picked the wrong one. And so this like idea that you're gonna like, oh, I just need to pick the metagame, right? Like it's hard looking forward. Like, what's the next metagame, right? Like everyone's gonna give you a different opinion. So like it's definitely like it's an interesting perspective, but is it really that actionable? I think it's actionable so far as like if you're just like hanging around and playing with things and you hear other people talking about something, you should probably just allocate a little bit of money to it, right? So you're not like even really trying to like rationally figure out the metagame. You just are like, oh, like people are talking about NFTs on my timeline, I'll throw a little bit there. But you're not like, oh, like you're not like scribbling on a chalkboard being like the metagame is moving here. You're just like, oh, people like the PFPs, so I'll buy a PFP. And I feel like just doing that constantly, which is like different. I don't know. I guess that's how I would think about it. And then probably should do more of that.
Let me run
that's like how I think about it too. That's how I think about it.
Let me run an idea by you guys that I've been thinking about. So I think in crypto, as we know, there's like this interesting convergence of gaming and casinos, if you will, or video games and betting games. They're about to clash, right? So a lot of people are like rolling out these pilots, which is, let's introduce like financialization to these like interesting virtual worlds. And to me, I think that's most interesting because like in the crypto casino, right, there's like a certain sense of survival because you can lose your money, right? So that's like a level of immersion that you're being offered. And so a lot of people like to play that game. And video gaming has been around for a while, and by virtue of the fact that you're playing with other people, you're communicating with other people, and you're in this like this simulation, this digitally immersive simulation, there's a level of immersion there too. So both of these are interesting games with levels of immersion. One because of the idea of loss, and the other because It literally mimics like real life spatially. What I think is potentially dangerous, maybe interesting depending on what your take is when you combine the two in like something like a Star Atlas, where you have people kind of living in very compelling, realistic worlds, like conducting activities with their friends, playing these games with their friends, with the possibility of losing a lot with risk at play. I feel like when you combine those two things, you could have people that are just so amped on that they actually just unplug from the real world. Like at that point, you have so much hyper normal stimuli. Like why, especially if like you're like short or handicapped or like marginalized, like why deal with the real world at all at that point? That seems like a better game for a lot of people, no?
I mean, that's like just Ready Player One, right? Like,
exactly. Just the world is just complete dystopia, and some people blast into the Matrix.
it's kind of funny. Like, I feel like some people think that's so dystopian, just living in virtual reality, and then some people are just like so hyped on it. Like, this is the solution to all our problems, you know? Like, I feel like Peter Thiel would be like, "That's so bad. Like, we're escaping reality," and then like Balaji would just be like, "That's fucking dope. We're living in the virtual reality," you know?
Yeah.
But I feel like we're already living in a variant of that. It'll be interesting if it ever becomes like immersive, right? Like there's just integrated world where like you just like a Westworld or a Ready Player One, or if it's kind of like where it is now, where it's super fragmented, right? Like there's not one platform that is the metaverse. It's like there's Twitter, there's your like exchanges, there's a random video game, there's Twitch, right? And like in aggregate, that how it is. That's like you're living in a virtual reality, but it's not like the ones you see on TV where it's like super integrated. I think the integrated version is just I don't know. I feel like it's hard to pull off, and that's probably why you don't see it yet.
I think the I mean, there's a lot of talk about the integration, right? Like having NFTs that are interoperable across these worlds. That to me is like a Pollyanna take. I don't think that happens.
Yeah.
Like if you just look at like the incentives of like people being able to bring their shit from developer A's game to developer B game or world or whatever, I just don't think that necessarily happens. But I guess the question is,
I think it happens, dude. Remember we talked about this in Lisbon. I think it happens to some degree, but it's not like enough. Like it's not like what people make it out to be. Like people go, "Oh, you imagine you could use your NFT in this game and that game." Like it's not going to be widely. I don't know. It's not going to be this like widespread adoption of every fucking shit coin NFT in every play to earn game, right? But I think it's just branding. So like there's actually multiple games that are doing this right now where you can use your Bored Ape in that game because it's like, or you can use like there's actually something on Solana doing this called Savannah DAO, and they're doing it with our project. They're doing it with like 10 other. They're doing it with the Cyber Samurai. They're doing it with like 10 other projects where you'll be able to have like your NFT avatar in this little like side scroller metaverse thing. But I think it's just branding. But yeah, I mean, the promise of like the interoperability, I disagree with. But yeah, what Chris was saying, I don't really think about it that much, but I've heard smart people, both sides, where they're like, this is gonna save the world and this is gonna like destroy the world, I really have no idea, but like what I do know for sure, and part of why I'm like so committed to like finding value in these like metaverse games and stuff is because I just think the financial opportunity is huge, and it's like no surprise, right? I mean, everybody fucking knows that by now. My dad knows that, but like, yeah. So it's kind of like whether it's good or bad, like I think it's inevitable, right?
Yeah,
because I look
it's
at
hard
it
to not see how it's inevitable. Like we're already doing it, right? And everyone likes
right.
it. People complain about it, but they like it. So
I was gonna bring this up. I thought, sorry, real quick, but an idea of like an integrated fucking metaverse casino and stuff. They have that right on Decentraland, but like people love these fucking. Have you guys seen this shit on Solana? Like DGen coin flip. It's like literally a 50-50 coin flip gambling game, and people like pay money to do it, and you can get these NFTs that like give you revenue from this protocol, right? And it's like rationally, right? This is like so stupid to ever play this game, but people post about, oh, I'm on a fucking hot streak with the coin flipping, and people love doing it. And it's like, but it's so I don't even know, it's primitive right now. But like, yeah, if Star Atlas pulls off this 3D experience where you can customize your guy, it's like, holy shit! Can you imagine how much people will eat that up? I mean, it's insane to think about.
We're following different people on Twitter. I've never seen this site or anyone
I'm
post
in the
about
trenches, baby. You guys know I'm fucking in the trenches, dude. I like some of the meta games that I think about are like so low time frame. Like this project I showed you is actually a knockoff of another project, and there's like 5 of these casino things on Solana right now. It's like a week-long meta game, you know.
High frequency trading in the metaverse.
Yeah, sorry, that's a weird time preference. I couldn't handle it. I would be excluded from that game. You just called from the Darwinian machine immediately.
There's like the main meta game. There's an offshoot. There's an offshoot of that, and then there's just like a final offshoot, and it's just like surfing through the metaverse on like 4th degree casino gambling app.
On that note, so you guys have probably seen me talk about this shit. This fucking little yield.
Is this goddamn Jewel?
This is Jewel, right? So my buddy, you guys know KW, right? We've done the space with him. He hits me today and he goes, all right, I checked out DeFi Kingdoms and I don't short crypto, but if I did, I would short this shit. It fucking sucks. But it's like, I was responding to him. I'm like, bro, like I already sold it all though. Like you already missed the game that, you know, like I've been telling about it for like 2 months and I just fucking did a 3X on it, farmed the shit out of it, sold it all. And then he's like, yeah, this is way overvalued. And I'm like, I know, bro. I'm on to the next thing, you know? Because he like runs a fund and is like thinking like huge value capture. But so I don't know. Sometimes I think crypto, that's what people argue about, right? It's like the whole thing with like Suzu and he's arguing about Avalanche and like, well, it's getting users now. I mean, sometimes it's just time frames, you know?
I think that's interesting that like the more capital you have and like the more responsibility you have, there's more inertia. So if you're trying to manage a lot of money, and people talk about this on Twitter all the time, how these really big funds, they don't even invest in crypto because it's too volatile, you know? So, and then if you're trying to do a crypto fund, you're not going to be investing. And it's actually, it's good for the little guy. You know, if you're super small and like you just have your own capital, I guess like you can just be like a little, capital. You're like a little, just running in and out through the metaverse, just trying to get a little bag while you can. And then it's like, if you're like this big ass ship, you know, you have to allocate so much capital that like you're still not even touching Bitcoin. You know, it's just so big.
Because even I was gonna say, even like the most liquid shit is like not that liquid. You know what I mean? Like even Bitcoin and Ethereum is like for some of these huge funds it's not liquid enough. Let alone NFTs. That's why I always tell my friends, I'm like, look, dude, it's really risky because it's illiquid, but like NFTs are how you fucking make it, dude. Like that's how I made it, you know, flipping NFTs because there's no fund that's like aping like 10 mil into like a profile pic project, you know?
Well,
they literally can't. Well, yeah, 3 Arrows did it. And actually, what the I just learned today, A16Z has a what's it called? Metaphor.
A16Z.
A16Z. Because that's how Kobe said it. That's how Kobe and crypto cred. Like, because they're from
you think you're British now?
No, dude. That's how I always hear people say it.
I like Zed too. I like Zed too. Saying Zed is part of the metagame of having read Kobe's stuff and
that's part of the metagame.
It's the crypto Creole right there.
To follow up on this comment, I think the issue of size of coffers to put to work is an interesting one because if you think about it in context of a game, if you're trying to play a game, a finite game, and you have a shitload of money to put to work, actually by virtue of trying to jam that amount of money into this small game, you actually sort of change the rules of the game, right? You can't really put that money to work because you move the market, which kind of changes the metagame, which kind of fucks up your strategy a bit. I generally agree that depending on the size of that capital, I mean, you hear people complaining about it all the time, right? Like having to put a shitload of money to work. It's not the same thing. You can't just be like, I have a good position, I have a vehicle that reflects that position, and I can put the money to work. You have to deal with all this other shit as well.
Yeah. The little guy has a chance in crypto. I kind of wanted to something I was thinking about with the metagame because like the whole trading piece just really doesn't resonate with me. Like I don't make that many trades, and it's kind of hard for me to follow the metagame. I think part of like the idea of like building and doing something yourself is you're trying to write rules to a game that like you like. So there's this one, like there's a passive sense of where like you're just watching the world and you're seeing the different games that are being played and you're just allocating to it. You're like, okay, this is going to be hype. I'm trying to make money. And then there's like an active approach, and you're like, I think this is a game that should be in the world, and I'm going to put time in to build it. And then you kind of just hope other people come in on it, right? So like Vitalik, whatever, and his squad, Joe Lubin, whatever, like they wanted smart contracts and like Turing complete like blockchains, and like they made that game happen, and then that sprung all these other games, right? So it's kind of like there's this interesting aspect of this like metagame is like you can in some ways try to influence where it goes with your time. You know, you don't have to just like passively watch it. And like most of us are honestly too small. We're just minnows, so we can't really influence it. But I think it's worth trying. You know,
you feel like everyone in their way, whether it's like active, like you're trying to build a new game with a set of rules, or you're plugging into a more passive game, so to speak. I feel like everyone affects the game, right? Like there's a butterfly effect. Every participant affects the game in a way, like whether you're a minnow or you're rather large. Like that's sort of like the beauty of the game, right? It doesn't ever sit still. Like every input changes it, every single one.
Yeah. Or even like if you're a long-term investor, right? Like those are the people that like they help steer like the game in the direction that they want, because they're not just like, oh, I don't care what the game is, I'm just gonna play whatever quick. They're like, I'll just invest in this and hold for a long time, because part of me just wants to see it exist, you know? Like I feel like that's almost the best investing, where you're like, I don't care if I lose money on this, but I want this thing to exist, and you push it that way. And I feel like sometimes there's some nihilism in crypto where it's like, I don't care where this thing goes as long as it goes up, and I'm just doing it as fast as possible. And like crypto's so like liquid that you put like these games are so fast, they're like fruit fly experiments. And I think there's something about like having a longer time horizon that, like, I don't know, gets rid of some of the nihilism of just like, oh, whatever the game is today, like what's the game today, boys? Like you should, I don't know.
I feel like you've got a interesting dynamic that has only been exacerbated in crypto, which is like for a long time, like those with a lot of money, like it's like a law of Soros, right? Like when he thought the Bank of England was going to shit itself and the pound was going to lose its peg against the Deutschmark, he was like, all right, let me short this shit, borrow as much money as he could, and he shorted it, right? But like if you have enough money, by virtue of your shorting it, you're changing the fundamentals you're betting on, right? And so that carries through financial markets more broadly. The more money you have, the less you're actually playing a passive game and are betting on extrinsic fundamentals. Your very bet can change reality, and then it could lever up the returns of that bet. And I feel like what happens in crypto, which I think has got to come to a head at some point, is like a lot of the biggest traders have like an enormous social platform. Like they have enormous leverage to move the market in the direction they want to. And even like the big VCs, right? Like they're really good at what they were and are really good at what they do, which is understand where the market's going, understand who the best teams are. But then like they invest in the team, right? And then they go out and they help them with hiring, right? Like they help them with marketing, like they use their social channels to pump the name. So I think there's an interesting like reflexivity in crypto that only becomes more severe by virtue of how like ubiquitous the social media is and how connected social media and your returns are now. Like think about like Jusu, right? Like ultimate, like people give him a lot of shit because he went from like the ETH narrative to bailing on the ETH narrative and going to the Avalanche narrative. But like looking back, like people are already starting to forget that, right? People are like, like it's Jusu, right? And like he pumped his bags and he moved on his horse. And it's almost like once you build that social media platform, like how are you not going to use it?
Yeah, dude. I think
there's
kind of a
to
fine
his,
line
he would probably
between...
say that he was just like saying what he thought at the time, right? Like he's not
maybe he was
beholden.
Yeah,
Like Go ahead. Sorry.
There's
Jake.
such a fine line between like when getting called out for like, okay, you're like dumping on your followers or like you're shilling your bags. Like everyone shills their bags, dude. You know what I mean? And it's like,
You're passionate
you know what I mean?
about your bag.
Yeah. Like, I mean, why would you
I'm
not? Like,
extremely passionate about my bags. Like,
to your point,
I love
that's
them.
like,
I
yeah.
research them and I believe in them and I'm excited to see them come into the world. So of course, you know, I'm gonna be proselytizing, no doubt.
Right. Like to your point, that's the value that you know, certain VCs, that's like one of their biggest value props, right? Marketing and awareness and legitimacy from them talking about it.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like the main thing is just to realize that everyone has a biased perspective, right? And no matter what they're saying, and a limited perspective. So people that are like, just because someone has a lot of following doesn't mean they know what's going to happen, right? I feel like that's like one of the main rules of the 2020s is like, don't think anyone on Twitter knows everything. It's kind of like a class in epistemology. But just because like they go on there and they're like, Ethereum's going to be the new substrate for all of finance and it's going to flip and everything and BTC is going to zero, doesn't mean that's going to happen. And now that because they're hyped on AVAX also doesn't mean that ETH is going to zero. Like, so it's just like you got to weigh a bunch of different perspectives and kind of try to think for yourself, I guess. As hard as that is.
Yeah. TJ, I'd be interested. So you kind of mentioned it before earlier, like you think that in 2022 there'll be more of a return to like value investing in crypto. I'd be curious, like what, like have you like positioned any certain assets or like what and why do you think that?
Yeah, I guess there's a few things. I feel like the meta games have been, I mean, they've been very, it's a bad word to use, but they've been very speculative so far, right? Like they've been very much pure play greater fools for a while, right? So DeFi summer, that was a greater fool phenomenon, right? Like you just rush to where the farm is, you get in, you make sure you get out before the liquidity runs up, right? Full wheelhouse, greater fool. Then like NFTs came around and sort of the same thing, right? Like some people are buying because they liked it, fine. But ultimately you needed someone to come in after you to buy your thing. Then GameFi, we'll see what happens. But I feel like what's key about 2022 is thinking about who the incremental buyer is that comes to the mix. And the thinking could be wrong, but my gut feel is that 2022 is when a lot of traditional investors and allocators have no choice but to enter the game. For example, I think something people don't really think about is the idea of a pension fund. Pension funds run some of the biggest books of cash in the world. They have these fixed liabilities that they have to pay out to retirees, and they can't get the returns that they need to get in the real world, right? Bonds aren't getting them there. Equities are sort of getting them there, but there are no dividends to match their liabilities. Real estate's at all-time highs with rates at an all-time low. And then you look at crypto and you're like, well, I don't really understand it, but I see that people are getting like 7, 8, 9% yield for staking L1s. I see people can get 19% yield on Anchor. I see I can use, Compound Treasury or Aave Arc as a money market account to give my clients or my policy holders 3 to 5%. It's like, and they've probably gotten their infrastructure together that they're entering the game now. But what you got to think about, and this happened early on with the early TradFi hedge funds, the single biggest thing that kept people out of the crypto markets was not volatility. It was, how the fuck do I explain this to my investors? Like, what's my defense? And so if you think about those types of characters coming to the market in 2022, I think you sort of see an end to the dog coin and GameFi Ponzi games, and you see a return to like defensible value plays. And I'm not sure really what happens kind of in this hardware infrastructure world, right? Like the Helium, the Arweave, the renders, the whole stack, like the decentralized infrastructure stack. But there's a lot of experimentation, and some of those models will work. And so I think those sorts of investors will start to look at like, where is there some sort of protocol that has an underlying technology that solves a problem better than what exists? So I think that's sort of why you'll see a return to value, both in the DeFi sense and just in terms of the overall protocol sense. I mean, I also think what you'll see is a lot of investors recognizing that in 2022, like DAOs are going to be sprouting up all over the place, right? It's a new experiment in how people convene, and there needs to be good infrastructure to support that explosion. And so I think that sort of fits into the return to value too. You need like easy tools, like you need like SDKs, if you will, but for DAOs. Like you need like stuff that allows people to just build up quickly and not have to deal with shit lower in the stack, so they can start, building whatever they're building with the group of people that they share a treasury with. I think that sort of is like one of the bigger narratives in 2022, which is why, by the way, like something like Luna is appealing, right? Like we're talking about this on the other pod. Like it seems like Luna's trying to touch the real world, right? Like they're trying to do some stuff that's utilitarian, which I think will be a theme.
Yeah, that's that's compelling. That's compelling. I don't really follow like traditional markets, so I hadn't really even thought about that, to be honest. Like I saw a couple of tweets about it, but like even like the S&P 500. Let me see if I can find that tweet. But people are showing, there's only like 3 hedge funds that beat the S&P. Yeah, here it is.
Yeah, that was an absolute bummer.
It's like terrible tweet this.
It's terrible.
Yeah. A couple of people tweeted this, but yeah, there's only 3 hedge funds that beat the S&P 500, I guess. Yeah. And so he was saying the same thing. He's like, where do you think that people are going to want to put capital? Like they saw what happened in crypto this year, and yeah.
I mean, do you think that big funds could actually allocate to crypto for staking? Like even with this, like the backdrop of this, right? Like they have to, like big funds can't deal with volatility. So if you try to stake in ETH because you want the return on the ETH staking, but then it's denominated in ETH, and ETH crashes, has a risk to crash down 20%. Do you think they can realistically do that?
I mean, I think like protocols like yours are going to allow them to maintain delta neutral positions, right? Like the infrastructure is there now. Like if they want to stake ETH and their yield is denominated in ETH, like that's obviously a problem. But as long as they can take out a put or a short a perp, like that kind of fulfills that, right?
Yeah. So you think they'll try to use DeFi to just get like hedged yield?
Yeah, and it's gonna be tricky. It's gonna be interesting to see how like traditional funds and money managers and even like sovereign wealth funds like interact with permissionless DeFi. Like I don't exactly know how that plays out, right? Like realistically, some people start making permissioned pools and then like they go through FTX at the beginning. Like there are ways to do it. I don't exactly know how the DeFi angle enters, but I feel like that we're at the stage. I mean, how long has it fucking been? When was the ETH ICO? 16, 15? Does anyone know?
I mean, 15. That's the thing with DeFi is like literally, I just don't think like American funds can't touch DeFi. Like some like prop shops can touch it, but like for multiple reasons, just like the bookkeeping doesn't make sense, and the like I feel like normal fund way of structuring things. They're also like worried about regulatory stuff, right? Yeah. They wouldn't get like a ETH put from Psi Options or on Serum or anything like that. So
no, I agree with that. What I was really going to say is like I feel like Jusu actually tweeted about Amara's law today, which is that we tend to overestimate the effect of technology in the short term and underestimate it in the long term. But I feel like what we're coming towards is there's been a lot of time for all this infrastructure to be built, right? Like the pipes and the bedrock, it's kind of there, right? Like we have our oracles, we have our L1s, we have a whole bunch of other infrastructure that supports all of this stuff, right? And going into 2022, I think people really have an opportunity to start building stuff that touches the real world. And I think that's interesting timing because just as the infrastructure has matured to the point where people can start to build like interesting, meaningful things on top, like these infrastructure hardware services. At the same time, you have all this money entering the fray that like wants to see stuff like that. Like they want to invest in like the application layer that touches like people and businesses, but it hasn't really existed to this point because infrastructure hasn't been good enough. Which by the way is I think another thing for 2022 that makes sense to invest in is like the enabling technologies. Like it's not like a novel idea at all, but you know the picks and shovels. Like if you're a traditional fund, like, you know that game, right? You're like, I can invest like way deep out in the tail at the top of the stack, but like that's anyone's game to win at the application layer. But whoever wins up there, if I'm investing down here in the infrastructure layer, I'm going to win either way. So I'm going to choose to be in here, right? Especially if I can passively stake for some extra juice, yada yada yada.
I think just like talking about this, I think there is something like an investor's dilemma, similar to an innovator's dilemma, where if you're managing enough capital and you're in a position of success, like you still just don't touch crypto, like just for all the risks that it brings. And the new winners in like investing in crypto are like smaller shops that like literally just like go into DeFi and go into these things, and like they don't really care that the bookkeeping isn't basically solved or there's more regulatory risk, right? So like I don't think and I think the big funds, I mean I'm just completely speculating, but the big funds that do it like Bitcoin because the Bitcoin accounting is like clean. Like I think it's kind of crazy how, I mean it's not crazy, but like how much clean accounting influences people's decisions when they get to a big enough size, because there's so much risk there of not doing clean accounting. Like maybe this is just like an overly granular perspective, but like I don't know, I think it's interesting like why maybe you don't see like traditional funds make the move, right? It's kind of like the same reason why like big businesses don't catch the next wave, because like the new technology doesn't fit in to how their current processes work, you know? So like, oh, we just can't do it. We'll wait till it gets figured out. And so what happens is like a new upstart ends up being the new big player. And then you just keep seeing like, instead of like the new one making it in the next generation, it's always like a new upstart becomes the new dominant player.
Yeah.
And like
I agree with that. Selkus in his year-end report was talking about that, which I think is a really good point. Like, it's always been like the institutions are coming, right? Like, when are the TradFi institutions going to come into our game and join us and pump our bags, right? In reality, the winners were small upstarts that mastered the new domain, right? Like the winners were like FTX and Coinbase and BlockFi. Like, they're new institutions, right? Like crypto native institutions were the winners. And so I think the investor's dilemma is right generally. But I ultimately think that the rip current is too strong for there not to be like some secular entry of that type of money, right? Like you can't afford not to be involved at all, I think, going into, I don't know, 2022 to 2025. Like there are going to be folks that like are so dogmatic, like Berkshire Hathaway probably doesn't own crypto for 10 years, right? But they're literally 95 years old and Charlie calls it rat poison. Like there's a lot of in between, right? Where it's like folks that, you know, have allocated to gold in the past, but they're like, well, gold doesn't seem to be working for this purpose. Like, what if we allocate a little bit? And then the Bitcoin bet goes sort of well. And they're like, oh, let's stake some Ethereum. That goes sort of well. They can hedge that position. Like, I do see an entry, but I think the point about you being really big, really established, and having a reputation, it just makes it not worthwhile for so long.
Yeah. I also think they just, because they're so big, and it kind of comes back to the liquidity thing we talked about before, they just go into like big L1s, or like they go into Bitcoin and ETH and they allocate a small amount there. That causes like Bitcoin and ETH to go up some more. And then people are already in that. Like it kind of like trickles downstream, you know? That's why I like the whole Bitcoin dominance thing. Well, maybe not using it as a trading indicator, but like why Bitcoin remains dominant, even though whatever, it's a boomer coin, is because like it finally gets big enough where then big people can invest in it. So it gets a little bit bigger. And then people take those gains and it goes down and it goes down. And eventually all the money trickles down. The money trickles down to like Shake's like fourth derivative, like betting app.
And then I 100x.
He's like,
let's fucking go.
It's like trickle down economics kind of.
I never thought about it that way. That's so true. Yeah, I mean, Bitcoin being like a boomer coin is good for these big funds. Yeah, I never thought about it that way.
Counting on
That it's
Bitcoin's
like,
clean.
then the crypto people like rotate out of Bitcoin, and it's like it keeps it like kind of I don't know, pushing it like underwater, and it's bobbing up, and yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's I mean that's how I think about it. I don't know if that's exactly how it works, but
That's my like anecdotal impression of it for sure.
I mean, like, Tej, if you were to try to stake ETH, like, would that be how like and get a yield on it? Would that be like chilling with your fund admin?
Yeah, Kraken does it.
Really?
And I mean, I don't. I mean, I'm exploring a number of ways to stake like more esoteric assets. But there's nothing intrinsically wrong with using a fund hardware wallet to stake natively in like a Luna or a Cosmos. And if you don't want to do that for whatever risks, I mean, there are options like Lido, which are also fine by the accounting requirements in the US. It does get complicated, and for that reason, my guess is a lot of people will avoid it. I think where it gets like, nightmarish is, when you're dealing with DeFi and permissionless protocols, and you don't know who's on the other side of the trade. Like the admins don't love that.
You can always tell who's American because they start talking about KYC and taxes. Terrible. What is the fun admin think of that?
Did you guys? Maybe we talked about that when we did the Twitter stories, but you saw Do Kwon when he was like someone asked him that in an interview, like, what do you think about like stablecoin, like FUD in the US? And he's like, and he was just like, he's like, the US isn't the whole world. You know that, right? Like he said some shit like that. It was so funny.
He's like, I don't actually think about the US because
yeah, he's like, I don't actually think about it that much.
I'm not from there. I actually live somewhere else.
Yeah, he's like, wasn't the anchor just so confused? She was like, what do you mean you don't like? You have to have some opinion about America. He's like, nah.
Yeah, she started totally tripping on her own words too. Like she knew she'd botched. She knew she had some like American Altruism she let leak out.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't blame him. Like why would he want to be thinking about American banking regulation? Like, he should. I'm with him. Just like, I just want to build my technology. I don't want to think about U.S. stable coins.
Do you guys have any thoughts on that, dude? I mean, I don't know shit about it. I saw that congressional hearing and like it made me feel a little bit better about holding stable coins. But yeah, what do you guys think about this stable coin FUD?
Well, I'm thoroughly biased, but I mean, which FUD are you particularly referring to? Do you the FUD?
Like Gary Gensler always shits on him, right?
Yeah, but like which angle? Like that stable coins are going to be regulated akin to banks, or that
they're security? Doesn't he say like, oh, these are like for sure security, and they need to be regulated by the SEC?
I don't think that pencils because actually the security angle might pencil. I think being regulated as a bank doesn't pencil as well.
And that's for like the centralized ones he says that about.
Right. I mean, the problem with the bank analogy is they don't hold deposits, right? Like to be a bank, you have to hold deposits, and you get to rehypothecate those deposits, and like you get to create more money than you hold. Whereas the stable coins, like the USDC, USDT, are one-to-one pegged, right? So there's no rehypothecation. But the securities issue, which would be Howey test, I think that gets trickier because if you're a stable coin that issues liabilities, which are stable coins against like money market instruments, like that's you're acting in a fund capacity, right? Like you're a fund that allocates to money market instruments, and then then you have that yield in a bank, and then you issue stablecoins. I think that could get kind of trickier. But either way, what I think is sort of the key takeaway is, I tweeted something about this at some point, maybe not elegantly, is like the assumption so far, I think in crypto land for a while has been like stablecoins are going to be deleterious for the dollar, right? Like the stablecoin mind share and financial share like takes away from the power, the hegemony of the US dollar. But I don't think that's really the case, right? Like a lot of people on earth can't access dollars and would really like to. So if you have a synthetic version of a dollar, and that synthetic version can go to fucking, Turkey, right, where the lira is shitting itself, or Brazil, or, India, or wherever, Philippines, that's a very powerful thing. And I think ultimately that narrative has so much power that I think regulators sort of have to realize that what we could in fact do is bring a level of regulation that is comforting to us. It brings us enough control that we think that wildcat banking and shadow banking isn't happening, but also allows us to export dollars abroad. Like that's other than education, that's the US's strongest export. And I think that I wonder if that narrative also plays out in 2022.
Yeah, well,
what I don't know about is I don't know what happens to decentralized stables, to be honest.
And that's all that I hold in Anchor.
And also, that's being in a position I am. Yeah, I don't know. We don't have to get into it, but decentralized stables, it's gonna be interesting to see what happens.
I mean, synthetic US dollars have been a thing. Like that's what Euro dollars was. Like people have been doing this for a while, so to some extent they can't really stop it, right? If someone just comes up with a peg that tracks a dollar value, like they can't really stop it, I don't think.
I hope not.
I mean, they haven't. They couldn't stop it 20 years ago, and like all the technology was simpler. So I don't know why. Like they were just like banks, big ass banks in Europe, issuing these Euro dollars, and they couldn't do anything about it. Like they can only. I feel like they can only like get things at the source, right? So like, if they don't have sanction at the source, like they couldn't like just go to the European banks and be like, you have to stop this, right? And so people just did it. And like, are they going to stop some like developer in Asia from offering like a synthetic US stablecoin? Like, I don't know. Seems tough, especially if there's like enough demand for it. Which I guess would be a good game theory for why like they should just support it and like gain advantage from it than like saying like they're going to stop it, because they haven't stopped it for the last like 20 years. But I don't know.
That's kind of what I think. I'm like, man, how could they stop it? That's just my rationale. It's like too big to fail kind of thing, And
I mean, they could stop us from accessing. Like they could stop us from accessing it, right? But how are they going to stop people in
like not really though? I mean, once you have money like on chain, right? Like they could stop you from a centralized exchange, but like.
But then you can't on ramp that money back to like pay for your apartment.
But let's say you have USDC, right? And then FTX US doesn't let you get USDC. You just hold your USDC, you yield farm. Then you need to pay for your apartment. Then you just switch it to Sol, send it, sell it, withdraw. Like there'll always be a way around it, I think, and there'll always be the demand for it. Someone just commented.
I would never do anything.
How can you stop Dan? Dude, actually, I was wondering if you guys if you guys have like opinions on this guy. How can you stop Danny Frog Nation?
I've been very deliberately avoiding it. I feel like it would just suck me in. Like it's so attention fracturing. The frogs.
What is this?
It's the guy who made what did he fucking make? Time and Wonderland and Popsicle Finance, I think. A bunch of stuff on Avalanche. You know who that is, Chris? Daniel Siesti or whatever?
I don't know anything about AVAX. I'm ignorant. I'm sorry.
No, I mean, I don't really know much about it either, but I missed out on a shit ton of money because I didn't look into it. For sure,
Yeah. I think the argument, well, I think there's a world where like basically there's KYC crypto and there's non-KYC crypto, and like maybe the KYC crypto tries to favor to like older, bigger institutions, and then non KYC crypto like is for people in countries that are less like restrictive, and then for smaller people, right, that don't want to be KYC'd. And you kind of see this fracturing. And then like in the KYC world, you can use USDC or like whatever stables are authorized and regulated. And then in the other world, people use things like DAI or you just use Bitcoin. Like hopefully Bitcoin just gets stable enough that like you could price all these, like, and people do that on some exchanges, right? They price everything in BTC. So I think there's a good chance of that happening, unless you literally want to like enter your social security number to use all this stuff. Like I feel like that's max pain for me.
Yeah.
It's like, to use the internet, you have to give your social security to some government admin, and then you have access to certain websites that they've essentially like whitelisted. But hey, I'm a law-abiding citizen, so everything I do, I'll do if they tell me to do it. But I'm just saying, I prefer not to see that world.
Always has been
Yeah.
very law-abiding. I've known him for a while. I've known both these gents for a while. They're, strictly conforming. One thing I will say is I'm not sure how the breakdown between KYC and DeFi happens, but sort of to Shake's point, like I feel like what Bitcoin ultimately proved is like decentralization does put an entity outside of the control of any level actor, right? Like all previous internet monies were destroyed because they had single points of failure. BTC comes along and says, we have a global consensus and BTC is still here and it hasn't been shut down by virtue of that architecture. I think what you could see, right, is if you do have a bifurcation and like DeFi is trying to figure out how to survive, right, outside of the watchful eye of the government, like if they do in fact decentralize their entire stack, right, if they do use all of this infrastructure that are networks that with redundancy, like there's a world, in fact, I think we will see a world where that's impossible to shut down.
Well,
like,
yeah, dude. And
how do you go about shutting that down? Like, what does that look like? What does the enforcement look like? If you really wanted to go balls to the wall, you have an entirely decentralized stack, and
I mean,
right.
I think
like,
you have to go like China, like where you literally are like firewalling stuff, right? You control all access to information for your citizens.
But like, what I don't know enough about it. Like, what does a firewall look like? Like, what are the implications of that?
Can you just
use
use
a
a
firewall?
VPN?
What does it do?
Basically, firewall is like you own the telecom, like you own the wires, and you can see the information passing over the wires, and then you just block information, right? So you can like, in the HTTP request, you can see like where it's getting routed, the IP address, all this stuff. And then you can just have people like in command and control blocking stuff, right? So like if a government owns like the wires, they can start doing stuff like that. Basically, like blunt blocking access.
But they still, like, in my last company, I worked with people in China when they weren't allowed to use Google, but they would just do a VPN and they would use Google, like Google Meet and shit. So how does that? Why did my camera?
I think you have two sort of issues. Like, it's not. I think they're using the VPN to get around like the fact that they don't want their IP address to be tracked to using some sort of application, right? Like in Dubai, they want to block FaceTime, right? So you have to use a VPN to use FaceTime, lest your IP address be attached to that FaceTime. But like Chris' point, like if the government owns like the hardware and the fiber, literally that gives birth to the internet, that's a complication. I do wonder though, like all these systems are going to adapt, right? So I do wonder if you're in China right now, like the reason you're using DYDX is because like the other alternatives to getting your money out and betting on financial markets are not possible to use. So you're using DYDX. When the firewall becomes prohibitive such that like literally the infrastructure is not allowing you to get online, I feel like someone steps in there, right? Like there's going to be a protocol or something that distributes some sort of hardware. Like for example, like what if you don't even use the wires? You don't even fucking use Ethernet at all, right? Like there are the Starlinks of the world that are literally distributing internet around the world, right? Like I feel like these systems will evolve to the point that
the individuals contributing to these networks have more than enough resources and power at their disposal that they can create a network that completely obviates any sort of centralized alternative. I mean, this is way out, right? But I think in the limit, like that's a reasonable possibility.
Yeah, dude. I mean, and like, fuck, that gets me that gets me excited, right? I mean, that's like crypto, like you said, it's a way out, but that gets me fucking excited. I mean, I think about like because there's multiple ways that a government could block access to blockchain, like you're saying, right? Whether it's through like the internet infrastructure itself or like companies like exchanges or like even like wallet providers, right? But like if you get stuff more and more decentralized and there's growing demand for it, like because I think we could all agree like we don't see the demand dropping, like the demand reversing and going back to where people don't want these like don't want to use DeFi, right? And so if everything else stays the same, like there's gonna be, and we move towards more decentralization, like it's kind of, it seems inevitable, I guess. I don't know. Because like imagine if like stable coins are illegal in the US, right? But everyone has a fucking Terra mobile wallet, right? And it's like open source and you can get it. I mean, fuck, you could argue iPhone would block it or something, right? But like
they would.
There's always gonna be a way around it, right? And then it's like, oh, I want to pay rent. Well, here, fucking, I'm gonna send you UST, and people accept it. I mean, like I could foresee a world where it's just, I don't know. Yeah, I don't even know what I'm saying, but I think yeah, I think it's inevitable.
Shake's bullish decentralization.
I mean, we've I think we've riffed on this before, lads. Like, which is like no one really like people don't really give a shit about decentralization, right? Like they give a shit about like UX and UI until there's some sort of censorship crisis, right? And then people are like, oh, we need something, and then something's gonna get built, right? And then like the hype cycle around decentralization and like hedging your bets against single points of failure, it slowly dies, and then another crisis comes around, like Robinhood blocking one side of a trade, or like Trump getting deplatformed from content sites, or like DYDX going down because AWS East went down, like all this shit, right? Like it reinvigorates like the sentiment of the time. But ultimately, like those things will continue to happen, right? Like I don't see a world where governments and companies are going to stop censoring things that are divergent with their interests, right? And each one of those that happens, like another group of lads in a garage is like, we need to build this from the ground up, decentralized. And I think it'll be increasingly moved not just from like software where all the play has been, to like the Heliums of the world. Like this lad in the comments just said Helium miners ? And I think like that's an example of like right now Helium miners, from my understanding, you're providing connectivity to IoT devices, but you need to have an Ethernet connection, right? Like you need to have a Wi-Fi existing ISP, and that in China's case, like they would have control over the ISPs, right? But like, is there a world where like Helium miners, like the hardware, it connects directly to like a Starlink, right? And then it provides a node with bandwidth, and if you have enough of those nodes, then you can route a packet completely outside the ISPs in China or something like that, right?
I think coming back to what we were talking about earlier, like I think this is why it's important for people to be like care about the game they're playing or the rules of the game they're writing. Like if you're just like, oh, I'm just in crypto playing whatever metagame is being ran right now, then it's like you don't really care what happened. But if you have the privilege to have enough resources, like betting on things that you want to see happen and maybe caring less about returns, I think is good on average for everyone. And maybe like you have a small percent, like a small amount of money, you're just like, I don't care, I'll just play the meta game for fun. But I think it's important, like when you see other people trying to talk about like maximizing returns, you're like, I don't really care about that. I want to like write rules for games that I want to see the world play. And I mean, sometimes it's hard because like if you're like, I want there to be decentralized telecom networks, you can't go and make that happen. But in little ways, I feel like you can support like building the games you want to see people play.
I mean, also a thought. I'd be curious to hear you guys' perspectives. Like historically, a lot of the problems with like building out this like infrastructure or hardware, right, is like, how do you solve the chicken and the egg, right? It's like a classic fucking crypto thing, right? But one of the more powerful things in crypto to me is like you have a completely different design space for incentives now, right? Like you can create your own tokens out of thin air,
right? And you can distribute them to people to supply your network with something. And the first ones to adopt, the first suppliers, they get more. And as the network grows, the rewards tail off. You can bootstrap whatever you want to the extent that people believe in the equity that they're receiving, right? Like that's a fucking powerful thing. Like if you think about like we have a lot of these. I was actually talking to a dude at Delphi about this, and his point was basically like we have all these real world problems, right? Like we have a lot of shit to solve. Like we got to solve climate change, and we got to pull people out of poverty, and we got to get like better telecom infrastructure, yada yada yada. You have all these problems. Like how do you start them? Like no one really wants to take that risk. Like a company can take that risk, they can get VC funding, then they probably fail, right? But if you have the ability to say, I'm going to create a native token that's part of an ecosystem, and I'm going to incentivize like all these individuals, like all over the world, to do this thing, like I think that's a fairly powerful primitive. No.
Yeah, I mean, if you just think about Helium, like it's pretty mind blowing. Like as a pattern for future companies, like token, obviously to onboard people, service providers, also open source code, which is also like in itself a novel idea. Like they're like, this is how you can run, like one of these miners, and then they can just have different hardware providers take that code and figure out like different ways to build it. It's like really, it just kind of like all the nice things about the internet just being like capitalized on. Definitely makes you hopeful of like the way that like open source code and crypto and like tokenomics can like unbundle some of these like historical like monopolies. It's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
Like they're trying to do 5G too,
like,
right?
What?
5G is live. 5G is live apparently.
Really?
Yeah.
Damn.
You guys are reminding me of why he said Ponzi. Yeah, I was literally about to say you guys are reminding me of like why I like crypto, because like sometimes I'm so wrapped to like kind of what you're saying, Chris. Like I am like only about return. Like I love Bitcoin and I have owned zero for a long time. Like for like probably 8 months I've never owned Bitcoin, and like but you're reminding me of why this stuff is cool and like why it is valuable. Because so often I'm in the parts of it that are only speculative and like Ponzi's, to this guy's point. But yeah, there's definitely something here, and it's good to remember what that is. I think to like return to first principles, like Hasu says.
Yeah, I mean everyone gets caught up in the returns because it's like you're like you see people doing it, you have the information and the know-how. It's easy to be like, I should be doing that, but it's kind of like you have to think about what'll make you the happiest over the most. Like, yeah, what'll really make you happy in like 5 years is probably doing stuff that you care about more than just like maximizing money, I think. So, but I guess the counter argument to that is like that could just be cope, and you could just be spending a little bit more time paying attention to make money. So
I mean, like,
I don't know.
Yeah, because you could also do it like SBF's approach, right? And just make as much money as possible, and then use the money to do the good. So there's like the effective altruism. But I don't do that, so it's fucking moot argument. It's all the money's for me.
The thing about the effective altruist, it's like kind of comes back to game theory. If every participant is effective altruist, like they're just all making the most money to donate it, like then what happens, right? Like kind of one of my worldviews is if you reason about if everyone did the same thing you did, would you be happy? Or most people did what you did, then it's a good thing to do. And if you're like, if everyone did this, it would be really bad, then maybe you shouldn't do it. Like, I think if everyone was like trying to build things, right? Like I would be like, cool, I think the world would be better for that. But if everyone's effective altruist, I mean, they're good. Like they're kind of a bad example, but there is some like self-defeating nature. Like an effective altruist couldn't tell everyone else to be an effective altruist because then it's self-defeating. You know what I'm saying?
I feel like the natural like evolution sort of handles this issue. Like they talk about like a taxonomy of players in games, that there are players go and enter games for different reasons. Like I don't know, there's the killer and there's the collector and there's two other archetypes, right? Like the same thing is the case with the human population, right? Like some people are natural born builders, like other people are like, natural born killers or whatever other archetype, and everything in between, right? And I feel like it self mediates, because if there's ever too many of one type, then all of those individuals compete against one another, and you have a culling, which rebalances, right, the species.
I'm a natural born shitcoiner.
Yeah, exactly. If there were
I
too
don't
many,
think everyone should be a builder in the sense of like engineer, but I think like, like the best case of an investor and a salesperson, a community manager, and like people that are just like creating more order in the world. Like I think if everyone did that, I think it would be good. So I guess I mean builder in the more like a more general sense. Where if everyone was a trader, right? This is kind of like why I don't like trading. It's to some extent is like if everyone is a trader, just like, or everyone's playing the metagame super fast, super nihilistic, like it would be bad,
So that would never happen,
but,
because people would lose and they would leave and they would go do something else.
Right.
Yeah, it's just yeah, I don't know.
I think effective altruism.
This is a meta game right here of like everyone's trying to influence culture, right? Like when people on Twitter are like, everyone should be a builder, like they're trying to increase their clout or like change well, you could argue they're trying to shift culture and like make something like more respectable, or you could try to like say like they're trying to get more clout, right? Like if I'm like, oh, I'm a software engineer, and then I'm on Twitter like everyone should be a builder. Am I doing that because I think everyone should be a builder, or because I'm trying to get more clout for myself?
Well, I think for you, like they're not mutually exclusive, right? Just like sort of like the person that invests in something, they believe in the something, but they also want to pump their own bags as their own interest. I think for you, like your worldview, like you genuinely believe that people should be building, people should be contributing to order, but also like that's who you are, right? That's part of building a protocol, so you're going to project that too. Like the things are reflexive, and I don't think that it all takes away from it. Like one of the sort of applying this selfishly to how I think about the world, like I don't always necessarily think that everyone building towards order is a good thing. Like I think actually the more ordered we are, and I mean that in a very strict sense, like making things neater, more controlled, like I think that actually takes away from the happiness of a lot of individuals. And I think that's you're seeing more broadly. Like there's a lot of societal and government overreach, and I think that can be tough for certain individuals. And ultimately, like over the last 2 years, we've seen a lot of overreach and a lot of miserable people, right? There was a pandemic, sure, but I think those things do get tricky. I generally do believe that, like, to the extent that order is improvement in people's lives, like order is technology taking a case of chaos, taking a state of chaos and converting it into something that's more efficient or helpful is a good thing. But like building towards order sometimes trips me up because it doesn't really work all that well for me. Like wildness is kind of important for me.
That makes sense. I'm not a proponent of top down order. I like the bottom up order.
You're just a technocrat.
I'm a technocrat. Dude, when you're talking about someone else's creation, I'm bottom up. When we're talking about something I'm working on, I'm a dictator.
No, dude, actually.
Wait, let me just interrupt real quick. You guys, you both talk, but let's do at the end of this the thing we used to do. You guys remember, like where everyone asks a probability question and the other two answer about something about games. But go on.
Oh shit. Okay. Yeah, I was gonna say something so random, but you just reminded me of it.
Send it.
What Chris said, like, I've started to kind of come to the opinion like that, like DAOs and like decentralization in terms of like leadership is kind of overrated. Like, because specifically in crypto, where it's like a token economy, and you have these token holders who are voting, and they're voting to make the token value go up. It like doesn't. I feel like that doesn't work that well. Like from what I've seen so far, I don't know, but I'm curious what you guys think.
Again, I'm deeply biased here.
Yeah, you work for a DAO.
It's also like, you know, not that I've really been a part of it, but like the maker governance model is like looked at as like something to mimic, right? As if it works really, really well. But sort of to your point, what tends to happen is it's not any more democratized in terms of governance, right? Like the same thing that sort of the same model the US used for governance, which is like a delegated model, is what tends to happen, right? So there's no more widespread voting on what happens. And in fact, it gets tricky because you're running a lot of decisions, right? A lot of important decisions through the collective token holder vote, which in theory works pretty well and allows a lot of people to have input. But like I encourage anyone to find an example of where, you know, a country, company, tribe, army's been effective in the past without like a small team of domain experts making decisions on behalf of a larger team. It's just tough, I think. I mean, just like what happened in Sushi Swap, right? Like like Joseph DeLong, like he's been talking about for a while how like he's been fudding DAOs just by being in one, and then it's like absolutely like there's a lot of probably reasons for that erosion, but it's very much an experiment, right? Like what we're trying to do here, like this probably does not work.
Honestly, in retrospect, it's pretty crazy. He was on Up Only, like just sounding so frustrated with the DAO, and then like a couple months later, like just had so much drama.
Yeah,
that sucks. I mean, DAOs. It's early days DAOs, or early DAO days. So
yeah,
I think you'll see people experiment with different stuff. Generally, I think democracy, like pure democracy, tends to not scale super well. So, but people are going to try things, and I think that's good.
I haven't paid that much. I should say, like you are right. MakerDAO is kind of like the example people try to like it. I don't know. It's the example to go off of, right? Or one of them. And I don't even participate in like Ethereum. I don't actually participate really in any DAO governance, but I like have observed it, and yeah, I don't know. It kind of frustrates me sometimes because it's kind of like, yeah, it just seems like it just gets nowhere. Like it seems like everyone's like conservative kind of, and then like, but they're also like, all just want the token value to go up, and it's kind of like you don't have like it's hard to have like a breakthrough like revolutionary idea through a DAO vote. You know what I mean? Like the DAO vote, like I don't know if you guys I saw with Mango Markets recently, but it was like, oh, we have all these extra tokens that are like supposed to be used to like further the protocol, right? And like pay people. And it's like, well, we're not doing anything to further the protocol. Let's just burn the tokens, and then the number goes up. There's less supply, you know? And then a bunch of people bought the token to vote on it for the token would go up, and then the token went up, and then everyone sold, and it like was literally right back where the price was before. And I was like, what the fuck is the point of that? You know?
Yeah.
But it is early days. I don't know.
I mean, it's also like I don't exactly, you know, this isn't really the most insightful thing, but it does strike me that despite the fact that historically direct democracy models have not really worked very well, they've devolved into either failure or centralization. It does occur to me that there's a possibility that we do have some DAO infrastructure and sort of like technologies that arrange people in a way that some of these experiments may work, right? There may be a technological shift that actually enables a cultural shift, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I don't know what that looks like, but there's been an explosion of innovation, right? I could see some of that innovation being able to underpin a new sort of model for democracy, but it's yet to be seen.
Yeah. I think as long as like people are holding tokens, are doing things in an interest that's not aligned with the DAO, then there's going to be issues. And that's kind of like the issue with every like protocol right now, right? Like when you issue a role to some off-chain participant in your protocol, like you don't know that they're going to act in your like the protocol's best interest. They can do their own thing, right? So like right now, a lot of the issues like for a DeFi protocol is like people will just spam a transaction or do certain things that like they don't care. Like the net, it's positive EV for them to just spam your protocol or certain instruction, but it's bad for your protocol and the overall network, right? So like sometimes when Solana's congested, there's some reason why bots are just spamming, because like they're gonna pay all these transaction fees, but then they're gonna make some money off of it, where it's positive EV for them. But then like the negative externality is the network gets congested with a shit ton of transactions, And I guess that's just like a microcosm of like what's tricky about crypto and adversarial systems, right? Like you can have a DAO and you can have a token, like you're saying, and people can come buy it and then vote in a way and then get out immediately. Which I guess I think Mango's trying to have like locked. You have to lock to do governance, which is interesting. I don't know that much about it, but maybe that's like yeah. So then you come up with all these cool incentive structures, I guess, to try to get around adversarial actors.
Actually, it's funny. This guy keeps commenting about Danny CSD or whatever. He's like this example of why sometimes I feel like I'm kind of bearish on DAOs, because he runs I think it's Wonderland, and like it's supposed to be like a DAO like hedge fund, but like him and his team hold all the tokens. So like they say, oh, propose we're gonna go buy some Curve, and then they just like vote yes, and then they are allowed to go buy Curve, right? But this guy's growing the DAO because this guy's like a good fucking trader, and it's like the DAO's being successful because it's centralized. Like if everyone knew that Curve was the good trade and they all voted, oh yeah, like let's go do that, then it wouldn't. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, because I've actually noticed a microcosm of that with mine's not even a DAO, right? But we put things up to a democratic vote, right, for Cyber Samurai, and like I'll say something where I'm like, okay, look guys, like this is a way where we can like grow this money, and then people will just be like, no, like let's just like stake Radium or something, because they want to like maybe win the IDO, and it's like they're kind of thinking on like an individual. I don't know. Like it's I guess it's just early, and we don't know. We haven't seen like this paradigm shift happen yet because of the technology, but that doesn't mean it's not going to happen, I guess.
I think that's a good point. The Mango one is particularly interesting, right? For the diversion between the long-term benefit of the protocol and the short-term benefit of the individual. Something sort of that I've been thinking about is like at Maker, right? What we're trying to do is like it's not the easiest shit to understand, right? And that's why ultimately I like to their votes to people that spend a lot of time on the protocol, that know the history, that know some of the underlying assets. So I feel like the more cryptic or more complicated subject is, the more likely you're going to have a centralization of power. There's only so many people that know the information required to make a protocol. But on the other side of the coin, I think if you have a protocol by the trajectory of that protocol can be meaningfully contributed to by the maximum number of people, I feel like that's where you can have a more democratic system actually impactful. Like for example, if you had, like, you guys know Roblox, presumably. Roblox is a game. It relies on user generated content, right? And it's really easy to contribute in that game. Like you can build whatever you want. You can build your games. You can build your experiences. And by virtue of how easy it is to contribute to that game, you have amazing content. You have people contributing directly to the long-term trajectory. So if some of these DAOs found a way, right, they had a product or a service that it was really very easy for people to understand and contribute to, I feel like you could have a model that's potentially more decentralized in the governance.
Yeah, I think like being bearish on it like isn't really helpful. It's kind of just it's like it's just better to be optimistic and look for ways that they can be useful than to think about, oh, like these are overhyped, I guess it's just me, like, 'cause I watch like the Bankless guys, and they're like, go work for a DAO, like it's the shit, and I'm just like, dude, like I don't know. I just think it's overhyped sometimes.
I think if you haven't dug into them at all, then they're underhyped, and you need to be like, this is something cool. And then when you start getting into the details, you're like, oh, this is still early. It's not like we've solved this, So I think DAOs are ultimately the way. I mean, DAOs are a way for people across the world to cooperate and run something, right? So they need to work for crypto to work. So, like to be completely bearish on DAOs would be to be like, this thing's not going to work unless you basically go back to like a Bitcoin level simplicity. But I think we just will experiment with new models. Like I think Dave White posted something like, is anyone playing with like models where, you know, it's almost like a class system, right? Where like some people have more authority than other people in the DAO, which is kind of like how normal companies work. But like it's not unreasonable to think that people will experiment with that, right?
Yeah. This is the example that we're referring to. I like to bring up the visual, but like this was completed 6 days ago, and like this was proposed basically 9 days ago. And so like this is when it was proposed, and then it like pumped, and then this is when they actually burned it. It's like here was the price before, right? And now it's like right back here, basically. I don't know.
So what's interesting is Wi-Fi, right, is going through a very similar chapter, right? The token's at a 1-year low, and I believe a governance vote went through to do large-scale buybacks, right? And so I don't think this sort of etiology is universal. It happened with Mango. There was some other protocol in the past, I think like DeFi 2.0 or DeFi 1.0 protocol, the same thing happened to. Like they were burning tokens and Stellar. They were burning lumens and the token kept shitting itself. But like there are examples, I think, like with Wi-Fi, where the decision's been made to do buybacks, just like an Apple or whatever, and Wi-Fi's been fucking ripping, right? I mean, it just gets back to the point that it's like it's all very experimental, and we'll see kind of like what the dominant models are.
I mean, I think this is, I don't know. It's tricky. Well, it's not easy, but I feel like people will make it work. You know, it's the only way. Like, you can't set up a U.S. company to run a crypto protocol. You're not gonna set up an LLC, so you'll need some system that's like crypto blockchain native to make admin decisions. So bullish DAOs in the long term. I just feel like
Amara's DAO.
The metagame, there's a clout metagame, on Twitter, and one of them is to be like Rust is dope, DAOs are dope. Honestly, if you just say Rust is dope and DAOs are dope enough, you probably will get to like at least 1,000 followers. And the thing is, they actually are dope, but maybe not as dope. Like
you're so right.
Moment as...
Yeah, I gotta read you guys a quote about decentralization from Hasib at Dragonfly. So I agree. Like it's like you have to virtue signal that you're bullish DAOs if you're in crypto. You have to. Despite all this, crypto communities love to point at each other and claim their competitors are not really decentralized, quote unquote. In a way, it's a perfect attack because anything can always be more decentralized. It's the original sin that every project carries. It transmutes decentralization into a virtue of purity, a universal moral failing, a ritual of self-flagellation. How impeccable is that?
Yeah.
That was like when the bankless guy said to Suzu, like, you've committed crypto's greatest sin. Do you remember
what was that?
It was about AVAX versus ETH or whatever.
Mm.
And he was like, you're committing like the cardinal sin or something like that. I think that's what he said. He said it in this really like religious way.
Who
and
said
it was like
that?
the guy from Bankless. I forget which.
David and Ryan.
It was David. It was David.
That's definitely another metagame, which is like crypto has a wokeness to it.
Yeah.
Like you don't want to be on the wrong side of that wokeness. You don't want to be on the side which is like centralization actually is better.
Yeah.
You want to be on the long decentralization side because that puts you as part of the tribe that's morally superior.
Yeah. I mean, I think we were talking about it before, but decentralization is a means of building like a robust system that fulfills users' needs. and not just an end in itself. So, honestly, yeah, like you've kind of said before, like decentralization shows its merits when shit starts to hit the fan. So, I still think it's valuable. I think the joke is that it's not an end and it's not measurable. So it's kind of just people yelling at each other about things that they literally can't even quantify. So it's like, yeah, there's no resolution to the argument, which is kind of the crazy part.
Yeah.
All right, guys, I got my question.
Okay.
What do you think the odds are that that Wikipedia or Reddit integrate a token by the end of 2023?
Oh, isn't Reddit doing it?
Are they?
Wait, doesn't
Reddit
Reddit doesn't have
doesn't
their
have
own token, but they have like token integrations.
Yeah, so I mean
For communities.
blockchain native integration, right? Like not giving golds or silvers, not upvotes, like nothing that's insular on their own database, I suppose. Like something that could be traded on Uniswap.
Okay.
Kalul is saying, yeah, they have an integration. I feel like this guy should just take over the podcast. Tell us about Dan Home.
This guy has the alpha, dude. DM me, bro.
We don't.
All right,
Tell me
so
what the next metagame is.
so based on Kalul's censorship, let's take out Reddit. I'll just say Wikipedia. Which, by the way, Wikipedia is hella desperate. You know, like they're blasting everyone with the asks for donations. Like it would be, I think, pretty wise.
It would be wise.
Okay, like what would their tokenomics be? Give me a picture to boost my probability estimate.
The Wikipedia.
Like, let me visualize it.
All right. Well, your tokenomics would be is like you've got no early investors, right? You got some sort of public facing events, an IDO and ICO. Once you have like 50% of the float, right? 50% of the float is used, is let go, and then you have an additional 10% that's released to like unlock staking, right? If you stake your wiki, do you get to contribute to and or edit other people's shit, right? And as people decide on the quality of your articles, the quality of your edits, you get some, part of the emissions, which is the remaining 40% or something like that. And also the ICO would raise an immense amount of funds for the Wiki Foundation or whatever, which is what they fucking need. Like no one wants to donate. Everyone wants WEN token.
So true.
It's like Miami coin, right? Like no one wants to like donate to Miami, but like I'll buy your coin, which is effectively the same thing.
I'm gonna go with, or I'll let Shake go first.
I don't know shit about Wikipedia. I feel like there's a low chance. I feel like I agree with everything you're saying, like that they should, but I don't know shit about like do they have progressive leadership or anything. So I'm gonna say like 10% probability.
I'm gonna go with 1%. Okay, and I'll say why. Like it's a big ass organization. It's already complicated. Like the idea of like people staking in order to, I feel like it's a version of just innovator's dilemma. Like you already have your processes. To like add this staking mechanism to allow for edits would be crazy. I would say there's a different possibility. Like all of Wikipedia is open source. Someone could just fork all the data and run their own project, which I thought that I'm not counting that in my 1% offer. Someone forking Wikipedia and then adding the staking mechanism seems more likely. But even then, I mean, Wikipedia is big as fuck. So, like, there's a lot of stuff going on there, and I think
it's de facto distributed already, though, right?
Yeah, I guess I'm just thinking like how. Like, I think there's like a huge power law of who's editing these things, right?
Yeah.
So like in some way, like the staking mechanism doesn't. I don't know if it makes sense, right? Like there's like 100 people who are probably writing like 80% of Wikipedia, which is also kind of crazy.
It's kind of like Solana.
I mean, it's like, yeah, that's how everything is. So, I don't know if the staking mechanism. I don't know. What's your probability? Obviously, it's gonna be higher.
Probably 10, 15.
10, 15.
I mean, it's all. I
I'm
think
just
it's all.
bearish everything. Sorry,
It's
guys.
always just like the way I think about it is like
Yeah,
all
you're a
the
Bitcoin maxi at heart.
like the Web2 companies. Like there's always like a chance, right? And then there's like a spectrum of who's like most likely or most desperate or could benefit most from like a token integration. The way I think about it is like Wikipedia's token integration is less about like any sort of incentive or staking mechanism and more like they have a fundraising problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they could just be like, we're issuing a Wikipedia token.
Bro,
Buy it to support our treasury. We'll create a DAO and we'll figure out how to a roadmap later. Okay, sure. I'll buy $sign Wiki.
We're gonna
Dude, the
launch a
token
game.
would rip. The token would be like top 10 within a week, you know? For sure it would. It would definitely be top 10 within a week.
That'd be fucking sick. I mean, I would buy some Wiki token. Like I feel like Wiki's been really good to me. I'm still not gonna donate, but if you give me a token.
They haven't been that good.
I've donated to Wiki. Trust me. I'll virtue signal real quick. I'm a Wiki donation card holder.
Wiki woke.
I'm Wiki woke. I got to come up with a question for a probability.
Where while you're thinking, Kalul said all the 3-3 is a lie. Bro, you got to check out this article. Where the fuck is it?
Is it just an ohm chart? Is that the article?
It's the Jordy Alexander. Do you guys know that this guy is such a fucking beast? I just discovered him. Game
Yeah, he's
theorizing.
on Up Only. And it was really good.
Oh yeah, that's actually where I discovered him. But then he's a beast on Twitter, and I hadn't followed him. But he talks about he actually literally answers this question that 3-3 is not like what it is 3-3 minus 6, basically. Like someone's still losing, you know. I'm trying to find it, but yeah, there we go. 3-3 is fake. There you go.
Does he just
like
talk
you said,
about
bro.
like the game theory of 3-3?
He just talks about like the game theory of crypto. He had another interesting one about how like you either buy Bitcoin, like the choices are like buy Bitcoin or buy shit coins. And if everyone buys shit coins, then everyone loses. But as long as someone buys Bitcoin, then it props the market up. So you can speculate on shit coins, you know? And he's like,
bro,
I've
been saying that all year.
Have you? That was kind of, I mean, it's kind of similar to what you said actually earlier in this podcast, now that I think about it. But yeah.
Well, in the beginning of the year, I was like, if BTC goes down, like everything goes down because everything's pegged to it. Like TFT's like, no.
I don't agree.
Well,
with
that's,
that
I mean, that's not
all.
like a novel take. That's like obvious, but the way he put it, I thought was interesting.
I feel like the problem with that is like that's the previous metagame. Like that's the BTC dominance metagame, right? That is BTC and deeper risk assets are correlated, are coupled. Whereas I feel like going forward, like the decoupling is what's going to occur. Like the alts are going to care less about what BTC is doing. Like, of course, there's always going to be a beta, right? It's kind of like, I don't know, like Apple leading the S&P. Like everything's going to have a beta with Apple. But like ultimately, I think what you're going to start to see is like protocols behave in their own markets, as opposed to moving vis-a-vis where BTC goes. I mean, there's definitely reflexivity. There's no doubt about it. Like everything's still risk assets. Even public markets and crypto are still correlated, right? But yeah. I think the decoupling thesis is fucking on, boys.
Okay, this is my question. What's the probability that BTC isn't the largest market cap by end of 2022?
Dude, that was literally what I was going to ask.
What's
you got front ran?
Yeah.
What's front run?
Like
run.
450, 900 right now, ETH BTC?
Yeah, about. Yep. What's the probability that Bitcoin is the top? I would say
not the top, I guess.
I would say like 6. Okay, that is not the top.
Not the top.
30%. 30%.
Damn.
All right, wait, hold on. I want to hear real quick.
This is actually an important. Like this probability like actually influences how people like invest. So it's actually an interesting question.
Jake, what's the if the 30% plays out, what's the Dom coin?
Some
Jewel.
L1 Jewel. Jewel.
It's
no
like you think Ethereum could flip in BTC at this point, like after all this FUD about
the thing is weird, bro,
and
is
like
that
L2s. It's
the
because
market
there's no
cap
other
thing-
L1s that are gonna flip BTC.
I think
so the
Ethereum-
market cap is kind of weird though, right? Like Kobe's talked about this, like with the burning and like I don't know, the market caps are like, I guess it's the best approximation we have for the size of the asset, but like I don't know. But could it be ETH? Yes, I think it could be ETH. Could it be Sol? Yeah. Could it be ADA? Most likely ADA's my pick for what would flip it, honestly. But yeah, I mean,
no doubt about it.
I don't know, dude. I mean, ETH
Dude.
got pretty close, right? I mean, ETH is close right now. It's just a 2x away, right? So if ETH 2x right now, it would exactly flip BTC. And I mean, yeah, so I could see it happening, dude. I really could. But what I wonder, because I go back and forth on this, is if that happened, does that mean that crypto is fucking dead? Because I've heard some people say that where they're like, well, then nothing's real and we don't fucking know. There's no reliability in the market. And I don't know if I agree with that, you know? I don't know if I agree with that.
I don't think that's right. Crypto's alive. It's not dying.
Okay, give your probability, Teach.
I think it's a good probability. I would say a little lower though, probably 20.
20.
And I think it's within that 20. It's most likely, like it's 60% likely to be ETH, and then split between Cosmos and Luna.
Because, dude, what if there was like an insane game? Like, what if like Fortnite was on chain and you needed to buy Cosmos? Like, Cosmos could flip Bitcoin, like literally, dude. You could play Fortnite and earn money, and like everyone's doing it from 10 years old to 50 years old, and you need Cosmos. I mean, I'm like, that, yeah, that's why I'm like, I think it's like kind of probable. Like, it just needs like some killer app that like brings in all this new money of like retail and institutions alike, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, a killer app could be truly extraordinary for one of these L1s. I also left out Solana. I would say like 13% on all three of those, and 60% Ethereum. I mean, like for Cosmos, the bet is basically like multi-chain world plays out, right? And people choose to use Tendermint and be IBC compatible. Boom, Cosmos pops, right? If Luna plays out, it's, China cracks down. People need decentralized stable coins. The ecosystem matures. It's vertically integrated. Fucking Luna is Southeast Asia and China. And then if Sol pops off, it's like, Sol wins gaming and DeFi, and then Sol pops off. Like, I think those are possible.
If Sol pops off, it's Sol summer all year long, baby.
All right, so what's yours, Chris?
Kyle Samani said Sol was going to flip Bitcoin. Did you guys see that? Yeah. I think he bet money.
Wasn't that like at the end of like
the multi-coin?
Wasn't that like the end of Lisbon? It just
yeah.
You show up to the multi-coin summit. The first slide of the multi-coin summit is why Sol will flip BTC.
I mean, I said end of 2022, right? So I feel like that should, like, over a long enough time horizon, then it obviously increases. But I'd go like, I think it's like,
bro, it's not.
I think it's like 5%.
Really? You think it's lower than 10?
Yeah, I'm just like,
20,
I think there's so much.
1 in 20 simulations. You think it's that bad?
That's what I was thinking. I thought that's like even like.
I mean, a year is short, I suppose.
A year's short, and I don't think any smart contract platform is definitively the best. And I think the uncertainty of that, like, I do think there's some like, and like Jordy talks about this, like there's an end game to Bitcoin that like everyone kind of gets and there's consensus around, and that's why it like kind of holds its price. Once that and I think, yeah, I don't know if a smart contract platform flips it and you're not sure of its dominance, like I think things get all weird, right? Like you can, like people might be like, if people, same thing like the metagame was like you saw ETH pump and you went to Sol and you just kept going down the layer ones and it hurt ETH's pump. like I think the same thing plays out because none of the smart contract platforms are really like good enough to be the de facto winner, right? So no one's just going to keep holding it. Like it's not that I think Bitcoin's so good. I just don't think any of the L1s are definitively the best enough for like everyone to just like. There's no Apple, where everyone's like, oh, they won smartphones. Like, I'm just gonna ride this forever.
I mean, to Shake's point though, like I feel like these things are, like we're hyper levered. Like there could be a hyper flywheel in adoption, right? Like if you have a killer app, like choose Solana, and like that's the onboarder. Like I feel like this is something people like keep riffing about. Like what is the next thing to onboard 1 billion users, right? Like Raj and Anatoly, are teaming up with Alexis Ohanian and some gamers because they think like social networks and gaming might be the next thing to, drive 100 million users or 1 billion users. But like ultimately, like if you do have that killer app that people care about, like that, I mean, that could be your crazy onboarding mechanism that immediately gives you that critical mass of the network effect, and the thing just takes off, right? Just like boom, like before you know.
Right, dude. Because that's what that's why I kind of disagree with you, Chris. Like, I don't even think it matters that one is not like the strongest, right? But like, if you look at like how much the crypto total market cap grew this past year, right? Like, in the midst of like Dogecoin being in the fucking top 10 and shit, and like all this like meta game speculation. Like, what if there's like an actual? This is actually what I was talking about in my live stream before. Like, the craziest money is when it's like actually demand, like utility and demand driven, which I think is what TJ like plays after a lot, and it's like if we saw that with some fucking app, it doesn't even matter as much to me like the chain. It's just like that people need it to play this thing that all their friends are paying and has a network effect. I'm like, man, like, I mean, I'm not saying it's probable, I'm saying it's less than 50% chance, but still, that's why I'm like, I don't even think it matters if like it could be Matic, I don't fucking know. The big thing for me though is the wallet.
Way.
Like the big thing for me is the wallet is like for Jewel, for this game, right? Like people think it's going to be like RuneScape, and I'm like, dude, it never can be RuneScape as long as it has MetaMask. Like it's just fucking annoying. And even Solana with Phantom, which I think is a much better wallet, is still annoying. It's like weird. Like everything you do to have something pop up and you have to click yes, approve, and like understanding your private keys, like what I want to see, I really am curious what the solution is with like the wallet user interface. Like if we have that and then this killer app, killer game, whatever, that with like a network effect, like fuck, man, you can make so much money from whatever trade that is,
I mean, for example, I feel like something that's sort of being slept on, maybe not. I don't know if you guys are maybe in different bubbles, but like the Phantom mobile integration, like what happens if there's an app on Solana, which is like, I don't know, like it's a sports betting app, right? And like all the normies from the sports tribes just like, descend on Phantom. Like, I mean, that could be absolutely preposterous. I don't know.
Yeah. And I guess if there's like, if there's enough like education and like reason to adopt a wallet, maybe you don't even need like the, how people say that shit, like, oh, people are going to use the blockchain and they don't even know they're using it. Like maybe that doesn't even really matter if like they want to use it bad enough and there's like incentive enough to use it. And I don't know. I see that with some type of gaming, sports betting, gambling, like these kind of things that are just like so, yeah.
The counter argument to all this is like for it to move past Bitcoin, like who are like it's not retail that's gonna like it needs to be big people that are gonna put in a bunch of money to move the market cap up that much. Right. That's a fair point. So it's only like a few L1s that probably have enough limp that they would like it would need big players to basically all be in like unison, like this L1's gonna win and we're gonna allocate $500 billion worth of market cap to it, right? Like it comes back to the liquidity thing too. Like Doge can skyrocket and then it crashes back down because it just can't sustain like that level of volume and like people dump. So like there's like
but to your point is that
you're like
there's
talking like one touch.
Yeah, there's a difference between like flip and then like flip for 10 years and see you later. Like because the liquidity, like you could look at the market caps and go, oh, you need $1 trillion to double Bitcoin. But in reality, you need like an order of like a tiny piece of $1 trillion because You just need it at once. Like there's not enough.
One wick.
You know what I mean?
One wick on Kraken.
You just need Michael Saylor to fucking buy, 1 million Bitcoin.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. Yeah. I mean, we'll see.
You do need the big players, though. You're right. I mean, and then it's like, yeah.
I honestly feel like
conversations are good though.
For that exact reason, like I don't exactly. I flip flop all the time on how much I like BTC, but I feel like people are like thoroughly underestimating the size of the potential buyers in the next few years for BTC. Like I feel like the government narrative has disappeared. Like that has in no way declined in relevance to me.
Oh, that government's buying Bitcoin?
I mean, it's sort of a perfect like Federal Reserve FX holding. Like if the economy increasingly moves on the internet, like you're going to need a digital gold to deploy, as you might to defend your local currency.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No,
I don't know. It also might fall out of favor for everyone else, right? Like you could see only a certain type of huge character wanting a BTC and a digital gold. And I don't know, like retail, not that retail matters, but maybe funds, they don't want a non-productive asset, for example, right? And so they skew towards the stuff that can be staked.
Yeah. I kind of agree with the way Jordy thinks about it, where like the end game is that like people hold BTC, like in a lot of worlds, essentially, as like they're stable. Like it's like gold, right? So like when things are going crazy, you hold BTC, and then when things are going up, you like invest in alts, and everyone cycles back into BTC. And that's why, I don't know. I guess I'm kind of afraid for BTC to get flipped, because then like does
you
BTC
have so
remain? No.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I'm not.
He's a Solana dev with a BTC magazine.
No, I'm a hybrid. You see what I'm saying though? Like if something flips BTC, like everything's too hot. It's like things are changing too fast, and like I don't know. Maybe I'm not thinking about it the right way. But usually what you see, I feel like you see like BTC go up, alts go up, and then when things start to drop, people like the system's just super leveraged essentially, right?
Yeah.
So the leverage has to unwind, and what happens if people can't unwind into Bitcoin? Like where do they unwind into? Like when the leverage gets killed. I feel like anything that flips BTC needs to essentially become the new asset that everyone unwinds into in a bear market. And I guess
why don't people unwind into stable coins? Like that's what I do. Right?
Well, the theory is that if you're part of the hedge against inflation camp and governments are being reckless camp, you don't want to hold a burning pile of money.
Yeah. And I know a lot of traders, they do what you're saying, actually. Like they trade back they just make more and more Bitcoin and Ethereum, and they just kind of never sell that shit. Yeah. You're right. Actually, right after I said that, I was like, no, I think some people are like me, but then some people like think in dollars like me. Like I denominate in dollars, but some people are like Suzu denominates in Bitcoin, right?
Yeah.
I think there's the two things we're saying here. There's like the Lindy, like Bitcoin is the king. The fact that it's a boomer coin is like good, and that's bullish, and we need it to like be king. And like government money and like sovereign wealth funds and big, traditional institutions, right? Like they want that like boomer coin, and they want it to be like stable or whatever. And then there's like the hyper growth of like some Web3 killer app that just like moons and shoots over everything. And yeah, I mean, I kind of stand by what I said. I would maybe say, now that we've talked about it a little more, maybe I'm like 20%, maybe I'm more like TJ. Like it's most likely Bitcoin is king, I think. But yeah, I think those are kind of the two things. It's almost like things staying the same, like things being static, or like some crazy like revolutionary moment. That's kind of like what we're trying to. And both are probable, and both are like different like parties that would be like make this happen, I guess. I don't know.
How about the hot take? How about the hot take that all of the L1s, as the
the effectively TCP/IPs, like the basic protocols of this entire ecosystem, become commoditized. There's a race to bottom. There's no value accrual there, and the value all accrues to some killer app at the top of the stack.
Yeah, that's. I mean, I don't know, man. It's funny. I was gonna bring up the opposite. I was gonna bring up like how, like the past
Well, I
6
think
months,
that's
like
actually
no
the-
app has really done well.
Yeah,
for the
but
most part.
that's usually what happens though, right? Historically. Like the bottom of the stack gets commoditized away, right? It's a race to the bottom. Like ultimately with L1s that you see already, the reason Sol is successful is because it's cheap, right? And so what you'll see like a proliferation of L1s. Like 50,000 TPS is
Oh,
ultimately
I get what you're saying. They just become cheaper and cheaper, and then you don't even need the token, really. Yeah.
Exactly. Like 50,000 TPS also isn't jack shit. Like that's like pathetic compared to like centralized alternatives, right? So you're going to see like a level of competition to drive the TPS super high and the cost super low, such that holding that much of the token isn't really relevant. But what you've seen, at least in Web 2, is like a lot of the value, instead of accruing to the bottom of the stack, which is safer, a lot of the value accrues to like where the consumer actually touches any of it.
Right. It's not like Charter, it's Google or something, right?
Yes,
Or AT&T.
exactly.
I don't know. Yeah.
I mean,
It's
I
or
think that's
Amazon.
bearish for ETH because ETH is basically going the opposite way. They're like, we're going to keep making ETH more and more expensive by making it deflationary. And you could argue that maybe the thing you're paying gas fees with should be getting slowly cheaper over time, like a Keynesian like type of policy, or not, whatever. Like basically what they do with the US dollar. They try to make it cheaper over time to encourage spending, right?
Yep.
So why wouldn't you do that with a blockchain? But instead, ETH is competing with BTC, and now they're making it more expensive because I guess the mental model is that'll make it more secure over time, and that's what people want to pay for. But I don't know. So to your point, like if a blockchain is decentralized enough and can be it and still get cheaper and cheaper over time, you think people will just go there, right? So, I don't know.
Yeah,
I feel like it's a reasonable take.
It's definitely bearish. It's definitely bearish, ETH. No doubt about that. I wonder if, like, in that simulation of the world, right? Like, ETH. Kind of been trying to formulate this for a while. Like in that version of the world where, like, ETH's monetary policy, like deflation, and just the fact that it's untenable to use for normies, like. I wonder if the narrative might shift from it's a like smart contract base layer to it's more of a store of value, right? Like that's why people hold it. It's like a more dynamic BTC. That's like effectively its role as a species. Like it's pivoted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, boys.
Yeah, to be honest, sometimes I wonder why people use Ethereum. I mean, I use it sometimes myself, but I don't know. Like, it doesn't really make sense.
I mean, the only reason to use Ethereum is that's where shit is, right? That's where people
it's
are.
like a network effect, I guess.
When that changes, like I don't. But the thing I find hilarious though is like what happened to ETH is going to happen everywhere. Right? Everyone's like, AVAX is so cheap. It's like, yeah, that's because there's no one on it. And when there's people on it, it's going to be expensive. The same thing with Luna. The same thing with everywhere else, right? Like everyone's going through the same issues, which actually is sort of bullish, right? Because they've already gotten to the point where they've achieved the scale, and those who are working on things are actually actively working on scaling solutions to make the thing work, right?
And then that also is kind of like, that's why the multi-chain thing might just be the way it goes. And it continues to be this way where there's like people speculate on different chains for different reasons. I don't know. Yeah. Because sometimes I see like ETH maxis on Twitter, like who are like, I know they're like, they can't be that rich. Like these guys aren't billionaires, and they're like, oh, like anyone with serious money, like has it on ETH because it's more secure. And I'm like, dude, like I know people with a lot more fucking money than you. And they have it on fucking Luna and Sol, like they don't fucking care. So sometimes but to your point, it's like, why do I use ETH? Sometimes it's like, oh, the coin is on Uniswap and it's just fuck, I don't have a Binance account. So I just go on ETH and I I bite the bullet, and I do the gas fee. And it's just because it's there, and it's like, it's there because, I don't know.
Even when you're putting a decent amount of money to work, like it fucks with your P&L, Like when I'm like deep into researching a protocol, like I've just finished a white paper or whatever, And I get out of it. I'm like, this is definitely investable. And then I realize that like it's an ERC20. I'm like,
It sucks,
like,
bro.
am I really going to pay on the way in and the way out? I feel like this is why what you're going to see is, like you saw USDT do this. They burned a whole bunch of USDT on Tron, which is obsolete, right? And then they reissued elsewhere. They chain swapped. I think you're going to start to see protocols doing that, right? Protocols realize that if your ERC20 is living, your token is living on Ethereum, like that's a problem for your growth. That's a problem for your users. Like you need to find a way to not do that. Like you already saw Audius do it, right? Like they went ERC20, then they went Solana. Like I feel like you're gonna see that en masse. And once it starts happening, like the floodgates just open. Like people are gonna start chain swapping. And like realistically, ETH is the first place it happens.
Yeah. Yeah, dude. And I mean, isn't FTX behind a lot of like the SPL wrapped shit on Solana?
I don't know. You mean like they operate the wrapping, the custodian?
Well, I guess now that Wormhole's like live, I guess it's Wormhole too. But before Wormhole, I think it was mainly FTX doing that, right? Like they would back like sushi on Solana or something.
Right.
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 But yeah, now there's Wormhole, so they have decentralized way or whatever. Yeah,
That was a good fucking shred.
This is such a good band, dude. Fuck, man.
I don't know how much.
Good to be back.
I guess it's games all the way down. So we talked about games. So we definitely wandered.
We started with games, and then we just talked about the flippening and DAOs. Honestly, we could have talked about the cloud metagame more. I feel like we could just
I wanted to, man.
Twitter for long.
Because I've been really fed up with it lately.
We could do that. We could do that next week. I wanted to tell you guys before we go that my parents have both used the word flippening in the last 2 weeks.
Oh my god!
Shani always says not gonna make it, and what else? Bullish. She always says bullish now.
Oh, dude, my sister started to say bullish as well now.
And she always says rug. She's like, God. She's like, fuck, that was such a rug, you know? It's like, I don't know. It's so funny.
It's hard not to just like have your crypto vernacular just spread and through all your friends and family. Like, yeah, my dad will say like I'm bullish this now about random things.
It makes me so happy. Like, sometimes I hear my mom on the phone and like my folks have like done quite a bit of work trying to understand crypto just because Sam and I are both in it, and I think because they're both interested and invested. But like my mom like mansplains other moms about crypto. It's just the best thing ever.
She momsplains.
The moms.
Yeah, we should run these back. I'm glad we actually recorded it. We could put it up. I don't think any of us said anything that would get us canceled, so I think it's probably okay.
Should I fix that real quick?
Yeah, see?
Except I said I was bearish DAOs. I was bearish DAOs, and I'm supposed to be a crypto guy.
Bearish decentralization.
Dude, I am so bullish crypto. Everything's going to the moon. 2022, we all are going to get Lambos. I love everyone.
Clout,
and I'm a law-abiding citizen.
Bro, like when my followers went up to like about where they are now, is because I was just bull posting and like shit posting memes and just like retardedly bullish, you know. And then now I've stopped doing that, and I don't even care anymore. Honestly, I'm like, whatever, dude. But I see other people doing it. I'm like, fuck these guys, you know. I'm like. But I was playing the game like 2 months ago.
Yeah, but dude, now you're better than it. You're better than the game.
Yeah. Now you're posting pictures of you and Shani like we're cooking, we're wholesome.
Wait, did I do that?
No, I don't know.
I've been liking the more wholesome meat space shake content.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest,
good to see out of the trading chair.
And like the shift I made too was like when I talk more about trading, it's on YouTube or in the Discord. So it's like, and I kind of like feeling like that because I started feeling like I'm like front running myself when I like post about trades, because it's like if anyone listens to me, like how does that benefit me, you know? Or I'm fucking dumping on them and then I feel bad. So I just like don't even talk about NFT flipping or like short-term trades. I just don't even talk about it on Twitter because I don't know. The only thing it's good for is when you could be like, when I retweet myself and I'm like, see, dude, I was fucking right. You know, that's when it's good.
By the way, I like when you tweet about when you're wrong.
I like that.
I'm trying to do more of that.
That's a good bit.
Well, because I had a couple guys act like I was like some beast trader, and I'm like, guys, like come on, dude. I fucking suck, you know. I just had a
I
couple
saw
good
that.
plays.
Someone was like, "You need to give me more of your trades," and I was like, I'm a little worried for these guys.
Yeah,
These
I was
like
like,
copy trades.
FYI, it's the 31st. So if you guys have any losses to harvest for NFTs, you should do that today, or for anything for that matter. If you're intrigued.
but like I talked to my friend about this. What, you buy the NFT from yourself? I mean, how do you do it? You just
No,
list
you
it at
just
the floor and hopes.
No.
Hopes someone
You
buys
can
it?
either try to sell it if you want to, or you can just write it off as
Burn
a
it?
loss. Send it to a burn address. Yeah.
You can just burn it. Okay, that's right. Yeah.
Like I bought a Solstead at the top. I'm gonna just burn the shit out of that. Take it as a as a loss against the tax.
I should probably do that too. Actually, fuck. That's. I already did it on like.
Bro,
I did it on a
it's pretty-
Degen Ape, dude. I took like a
pretty
70
nice.
soul loss on a Degen Ape yesterday.
It's a pretty nice chunk of change, the Solstead write off. I'm hyped on it.
Yeah, mine would be like 70 soul too or something. Holy shit, man.
All right, boys.
God,
Have a good night. Happy New Year. It's good to see both of y'all. I'm excited to see you both in person. Chris, I'm gonna see you in 2 weeks. Shake, about a month. Let's fucking go.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah.